Hi, my name is Bita Hanavar. I'm a board member at Atlanta Photojournalism Seminar, and I'm here today with Ben Gray and Alyssa Pointer, both of whom I've had the great pleasure of working with at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. Ben is a creative visual communicator with more than 25 years of professional experience as a photojournalist, videographer, photo editor, and communications officer. He is currently based in Atlanta after returning from the Middle East, where he worked in Jerusalem and Palestine for more than 3 years in the nonprofit and religious sector with the Evangelical Lutheran Church and the Holy Land and the Lutheran Worship. Before moving to the Middle East, he worked 18 years at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution as a photojournalist, photo editor, and director of photography. He is a graduate of Ohio University's Visual Communication program and served 8 years on the board of directors of the Atlanta Photojournalism Seminar. And I'll pass it on to you, Ben. Looking forward to seeing your stuff.
Thanks, Bita. I really appreciate it. And I want to say a big thank you to the board and to the volunteers at the Photojournalism Seminar. The seminar has been near and dear to my heart since I moved to Atlanta in 1998. It's really been an inspiration and a kind of a continuing presence in my career. And just really wonderful to be here. And I'm thrilled to be talking to you guys. Thanks for inviting me. I'm going to start off. I mean, Bita kind of went over it. I'm going to go over my kind of career trajectory real quickly. It's very much what I would consider a traditional, for someone my age in the profession, a very traditional kind of trajectory. I went to Ohio University, studied photojournalism, did a few internships at my hometown paper during that time. Finished college, graduated, moved to Florida, and worked at the Naples Daily News as an intern for 6 months. Short time with a commercial photographer while I worked my way into a position at the Bonita Banner, which was a twice weekly that the Naples Daily owned. And then from there, moved on to the Naples Daily. And then in 1998, got a job with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. So total of about 18 years with the AJC. Started off as a staff photographer and did that for about 11 years. In that time, did a little bit of everything, did some beat work on both the Falcons, Braves, political work, a little bit of everything. Became sports photo editor briefly, and then became the director of photography. Did that for 4 years. And during that time, kind of really decided that my love was to be out shooting, and that was my calling, and I just was done being in the office. So devised a plan to get back out on the street, went back to shooting for about 3 years. So that would have led up to about 2016, and that's when my career took a less traditional turn. My wife, Adrienne, was just finishing seminary and on track to become a Lutheran deacon. And I told her while she was in seminary, she had been supporting my career and allowing me to really dig into the journalism world up until that point. And I said, when you graduate, you find something you want to do and I'll follow you. So she found, or maybe the job found her as a communications coordinator for the Evangelical Lutheran Church in Jordan and the Holy Land. So a communications position working with Palestinian Christians in the West Bank, in Jerusalem, in Jordan. And thankfully, the position kind of came with an option for a spouse to work part-time. And I was the visual arm of the communications team. So 2016, we packed up a few things, sold everything else we owned, and moved off to Jerusalem with our kids. Never really, I guess at that point, we didn't know that we'd ever come back to Atlanta for sure, and maybe not even the United States. We just didn't really know where we would go from there. So let me go ahead and show some of the work that I did while we were in Palestine. I think we lost the video there. see, can we get that to play? Well, maybe. Excuse the technical difficulty here. All right. So, what you saw was certainly documentary work, but it also was not journalism. Um, and, I was prevented from doing journalistic work while I was there. We were on church visas. And because of that, we weren't allowed to. I wasn't allowed to cover news. I couldn't really go to protests. I couldn't take pictures of those types of things. That would endanger our visas. It would endanger the visas and the papers of the Palestinian workers that came and traveled through the checkpoints to come work at the church. In Israel, and the state monitors and credentials journalists. And if you don't have that state approval, then you can't do it, or you'll get removed from the country. So, I would have loved to have been in Gaza. I would have loved to have been in the middle of some of the protests that happened there, but I couldn't do that. So I do want to talk about Palestinian Christians. They make up less than 2% of the population in Israel, Palestine, and that's a dwindling number. I mean, that's the the birthplace of Christianity. All the major sites are there, and because of the oppression and the systemic racism that's there, it's dwindled. And that something that being kind of immersed in that for a period of time really brought me a lot of awareness of the situation in the United States and the symptoms of generational oppression and just generational racism. And so the picture you see now is my family. And it was surprising to me that it took leaving the country and being totally outside of my culture to really understand what was happening in the United States. Justice. And that's with 21 years now, married to my wife and having biracial children. I think, I say that just as an example of how hard it can be, even for somebody who thinks they're aware and who really looks critically at things, to really understand the depths of the problems we have in the United States. So come to the end of 2019, Adrian's contract is coming to an end with an option to renew, but we decide it's time to move on from Palestine. And Adrian took a job in Geneva at the Lutheran World Federation there as communications officer. And originally we were going to all move to Switzerland, but our children really wanted to have an American high school experience. So we decided at the last minute, right at the end of the year, that the best thing to do for the family was for me and the kids to come to the U.S. Adrian would go to Geneva. We'd kind of go back and forth for visits. And then in about a year and a half, move to Switzerland to be with Adrian. Of course, we didn't expect the pandemic to come, so that has complicated those things. But what it amounted to is basically me being here with the teens as things started to get really complicated in the United States. I'd say that kind of the next thing that happened was Ahmaud Arbery being killed, and that really hit me hard. Partially just because of this new understanding of the racial dynamics in the United States, but then also because I'm a runner, and the reason I love running is I go out and explore and I see new places, and that's exactly what he was doing when he was killed. So it gave another level to my understanding of that privilege that I had. So after that, we have the George Floyd video come out, and the the racial movement that starts then, the social justice movement. So when I had come back to the United States, I was lucky because with my relationship with the AJC, we quickly started working together, and I started doing a lot of freelance for them. The first protest, peaceful protest that was going to happen after the George Floyd video came out, they asked me if I could cover that, and I really felt compelled that I needed to be there and help document history. But what I didn't know is how fast it was going to escalate and how that was going to change. So I'm going to go ahead and show some of that work now. All right. So I've only got a minute or two before I want to pass on to Alyssa, so she's got time to speak too. But I did want to talk a little bit, just real briefly, about you know, what an existential kind of question I had, and how hard it was for me coming back into the situation, um, the racial tensions, trying to cover. Not just the the violent parts of it, but also the peaceful protests and all aspects of it, and kind of having that responsibility. But switching back from an NGO, having a point of view, documentary kind of position, back into journalism. So that was it caused me a lot of nights of really staying up late and trying to think about that and think about what my role was here. I was posting these images on social media also, and Facebook. I was getting 1,000 shares a night on some of them, and I felt really compelled to kind of tell some of my story and how that intertwined, and what I was seeing and why how that affected me. Um, but what happened was, when I started reading the comments, I noticed the conversations that were happening around the pictures, and the way people were struggling with their own ideas, and that reinforced in me the journalistic reasons not to do that, not to say my own how I was feeling or what I was seeing, and to let people figure that out for themselves, and for them to discuss it and understand it in a different way. Um, so I think it's time to pass on to Alyssa. Um, so I think if Vita can come back. Hey.
Yeah.
And we will have time for questions
Thanks,
at the end, I
Ben.
believe, too. Yes.
That's right. We'll come back at the end and have questions for both Ben and Alyssa. And with that, I'd like to introduce Alyssa, who's a visual storyteller who works at the AJC as a staff photographer. She is a proud Southern Black woman who, no matter her surroundings, create impactful images of the people and places within a community. She has interned at Creative Living Atlanta, Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, and the Louisville Courier Journal. She spent a year as a photojournalist at the Chicago Tribune before coming back to Georgia, her home state. She enjoys challenging her visual perspective with daily but joy in working on long-term narrative projects and photo essays that focus on the intersectionality of race, class, culture, geography, and gender. She is a board member of the Atlanta Photojournalism Seminar and the Journalists Visual Task Force. And with that, Alyssa, I'll give it to you.
Awesome. Thank you guys for having me and for allowing me to be a part of this. I remember the first time I came to the APJ seminar, I was in college and I was just happy to be back home. So a little bit about me. My name is Alyssa, as Bita said. I am a graduate of Western Kentucky University. I had a really good time learning in their photojournalism program. I also interned at a few papers, like Bita said, throughout my time in college, and really enjoyed working at the different papers with the different staff. Every paper from the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel, Louisville Courier Journal, and the Chicago Tribune. I loved working with the people there. It was such a great environment. I loved that people took me under their wing, and I learned a lot from them. And so I'm very thankful for that. But yes, I've been at the AJC for 3 years now. It is 3 years this month. I'm so happy to be back in my home state to tell stories of things happening here. I grew up, like Bita has said in my bio, I am a proud Southern Black woman. I am from here. My parents did not grow up in the South, but a lot of our roots are from the South. So I'm very happy to come back and tell stories of things happening within my community. So I'm just going to go through a few images of things that I have photographed while working at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution. And so it's been interesting to work on general news assignments, to work on spot news assignments, figuring out the things that I can photograph to help tell better stories. As a Southerner, I really enjoy, like Bita said, the challenge of making mundane things maybe more interesting. And I really love working on long-term projects. So at the AJC, I do spot news, general news, sports, entertainment, anything that you can think of. And working at those papers before has really given me the opportunity to stretch my creative visual eye while working at the AJC. So these are more sports photos. Lots of football, lots of losing teams in Atlanta, and that's okay. And so recently I got interested in politics because of Stacey Abrams, who ran for governor in 2018. A lot of people were interested into knowing why I left, other papers to come back down to the South. And I really just I have a love-hate relationship with the history of the South. There's a big issue with race and religion, and there's all these things combined that help people, I guess, in the past try to understand what the South is like. And so I miss you too, Erin. So politics. So I came back to the South. I knew nothing about Stacey Abrams, except for if she won, she would have been historical. So I decided that I was going to try my best to follow her and capture what it was like for the first Black woman to have won if she did the governor's seat. And so I traveled all throughout the state of Georgia following her. Essentially, she called me her shadow, but she did not let me into the, photojournalist wants to get those very intimate moments, but we're not usually able to get it. And she was very guarded. And so through that whole process, I learned a lot about not giving up, because every time she would tell me no, I would get a little down, but then I would just keep trying to find other ways to photograph things. And so it was very interesting to go through the whole process of working with her. She had so many celebrities and or big people come speak on her behalf. So we had John Lewis, Oprah Winfrey came to Georgia. We had Obama come to Georgia. It was just very interesting to be in a place in that time, because growing up, if you would have told me Georgia would have become a battleground state, I wouldn't have believed you because of the past that they've had. So these are all those images from there. And I've found a liking to politics, and I think that's something I want to pursue more. And we're almost done. Okay, so these are the images from the protests. Like Ben said, I don't think people really knew what was going to happen on the first day. And so I actually went out with Ben on the first day to cover this protest because it was pretty big. I remember I went to the state capitol beforehand and I spoke to the police officers and I said, what do y'all think is going to happen, just to gauge it? And they thought it wasn't going to be as big as it was. And so it was a very interesting time. The protest did start off peaceful, but as it got back to its starting point, it started to get a little more hectic. And so I'm going to just show a few images from that portion. And so what I want to say is, during my time doing this, I had never had conflict training. I didn't know what I was getting myself into. It was a first experience for me. And to be honest, I was very scared. I didn't know what was going to happen. It felt good to have been with me, knowing that there is someone that I could go to if something did happen, but we did keep our separate ways for the most part. I tried not to be near Ben while he was shooting, and that actually helped me in some terms because I was able to get images from up high while he was down low, getting other images. And so during this process, like I said, it was all new to me. I was just photographing everything. I was photographing other journalists. I was photographing the police officers. I was trying to get a feel of this moment. And I think that through my images, you can kind of see that. So there were people throwing, weapons at police officers. I took this picture of these police officers who were holding back one of their colleagues who was getting a little mouthy with a protester. And these are police officers that had a precinct in that area. And I believe that for me, it was just nerve-wracking to be around all of those things. So these images aren't in any particular order, but these are the images from the George Floyd protests that were happening in Atlanta. This is a journalist who has so many different cameras, and he's like, us trying to figure out, how do I make this, work? He's got a live camera with his phone, but he's also shooting for later reports. And so it was just interesting to be around all of those different things. Let me go back real quick. So these are images, people were trying to flip a police car. And so in this image that the young people told me was all over TikTok, I don't have a TikTok, so I don't know, that when I took this image, Ben was actually down by the burning police car. We were both in the same area. And I realized from a hint, from a tip from a photojournalist that was watching live, that if I went up to the roof or the top of this parking garage, I'd get a good angle. So I went up there and took this photo and sent it in. Then right after that, the police had made everyone get off the parking garage. And it was just, so that's when I went back down and I got this image of this firefighter trying to put out the fire with the police protecting them. It was very interesting to be in that environment because at one point the firefighters stopped putting out police vehicle fires because they didn't feel protected while they were in the situation. I took pictures of police officers. This police officer has milk coming down her helmet because people were throwing gallons of milk at them. I got this little moment over there that someone wrote, "Every riot is a rush." There were people outside with guns, and I don't know if they were loaded, but they were talking through the situation and kind of just figuring it out. And so I'll be a little quiet right now and just kind of run through a few of these images. Feel free to throw questions in the mix and maybe I can answer a few of them. During that time, we did have another big police-involved killing, and with Rayshard Brooks, which happened in Atlanta. So that was something else that we had to cover. And like I said, going into it, I bought some swimming goggles. I bought another pair of swimming goggles because I really just didn't know what I was getting into. Like I said, I didn't have the training, so it was all kind of new to me. But I felt there's a very good photojournalism community in Atlanta, and they really do take you under your wing. So I was very comfortable being in certain aspects. Got this picture of police officers trying to figure out how to do zip ties because they had never done them before. We got this interaction with police and riot gear and the protesters. So let me go back one. So during my time photographing, the protesters decided to get on the highway, and that was something you weren't supposed to do. In our state, the state troopers' jurisdiction is the highway. So they got out there and they were helping people, or they were pretty much rallying people off the highway. And during that time, I was actually detained by another agency that was out there, and that was the Georgia Department of Natural Resources. And it was a whole instance of me telling them who I was. I had a badge on me and they didn't care. The initial officer told me to my face that he did not care who I was. He turned me around and he told his other officers to put me in zip ties. And for me, going from a perspective of feeling very strong in the moment of, I'm over here documenting the world around me. This is my city. And to be placed in handcuffs and to be told that the badge that I was given, the one thing I thought that would protect me, didn't work. And so it's like, what do I do now? And the only reason I was able to get out of that predicament is because 3 other journalists who work in the city spoke up for me. But I want people to understand that I had done everything right. I told them who I was. I had a press pass. They saw the badge on me and kept asking me, well, do you work with this guy? Trying to get me to say I work with them. And it was so frustrating to know that my word was not enough for them to let me go. And as a African-American woman who I know I'm an anomaly as a staff photojournalist at any newspaper. I don't know can you name 10, African-American female photojournalists that are on staff? The answer is probably no. And so being in that predicament, it was very frustrating for me, but I continue to work like I always do. And I went down to Brunswick where the Ahmaud Arbery trial was happening and took some pictures there of people watching. I took pictures of a man who came and was hailing the Confederacy. A man came there and was speaking about that. And for me, that was just so integral to what the South is. Like I said, I have a love-hate relationship with the place. I love it, but I hate it. But it is what it is, and you can't run away from it. So why not document it? This is Rayshard Brooks's wife. I also there was another killing that happened in Atlanta. At the site where Rayshard Brooks was killed, the police kind of weren't policing the area, and a young girl, 8 years old, Sequoia Turner, was killed by a stray bullet. And so I photographed her funeral. This is her little cousin, 8-year-old. Imagine being 8 years old and going to your little cousin's funeral and singing, This Little Light of Mine. So I was able to be in the church and take images as the event took place, and I cried the entire time. Like, I'm a very feely person, so there was tears streaming down my eyes the entire time that I was working. And so this is another protest that we had. Like I said, race in the South. This was a protest on the Stone Mountain, which is a Confederate monument. There is a Confederate monument in Stone Mountain. So I covered that, and it was very interesting to see the two sets of people that came. Here we go with religion again in the South. This guy was preaching the entire time, and right behind me, there were literal groups of opposites going at each other. And to me, that's just super interesting. And I know my mom's always asked me, do I feel uncomfortable? And for the most part, I don't. I don't really engage with others unless I need to. And so say all that to say, this year has been a whirlwind. Earlier, I believe in maybe August or July, John Lewis passed away. And so I had the opportunity to photograph that whole intimate, starting from Alabama to Georgia. I was able to photograph that event. So I've got some images to show that. It was great to see a bunch of other photojournalists coming in to document what a historic time that was. I really enjoyed being there. I know if you all were here earlier, I talked to Michael about, this image. We were both on opposite sides of the bridge trying to figure out how we could photograph this. And I happened to see this happening. They were putting the roses down to represent the blood that was shed on the bridge before they pulled John Lewis's body over. And I thought that was so beautiful. Just a really great experience. And during that time, my editor had been speaking to the people in charge of his events, and we figured that we were going to be the pool for the funeral. And so I asked if I could photograph that because I thought that was it's a big deal. And at first I didn't want to ask because I thought it was going to be given to someone else who had been here longer, but a good friend of mine now, Brent Anderson, she worked with AP. She said, just speak up. So I spoke up and I was able to photograph this event. And it was such a tremendous occasion. His body was flown in after it went to Washington, D.C. to Atlanta. And I was with them on the processional, seeing so many people, waving American flags and showing their respect for him. This picture is super interesting. This is the governor of Georgia and the mayor of Atlanta. And at that time, they were actually feuding, but they were able to come together in this one instance to welcome his body. And John Lewis had, I believe, it was the third African-American to later lay in state in the Georgia State Capitol building. So it was very interesting to be a part of that experience. And so I'll just go through a few more of these images. And so this is when his body was at the Georgia State building. This is the Georgia Black Caucus, lawmakers coming in, or they were helping proceed his body out. And then we go to the funeral service, where it was filled with a bunch of people. I had never been so nervous in my life, to be honest. The images I was making at the beginning is just people standing at a podium, and I was freaking out. I was like, these have to be the most boring images people will see. But at the same time, I'm documenting this, so I'm just shooting what I could. At first, they weren't really letting us roam. And so we had to really talk to the people in charge and say, hey, I can't, I was able to get in the baptismal area because I had to let them know I cannot photograph the presidents on this one side if you make us stay in the area that you did. So I was kind of running around. I have had editors reach out to me afterwards because I was pulled saying, how did you move so much? Did you have a remote set up? And it was like, no, I knew how important this was, and I wanted to document it the best way that I knew how. So I did my absolute best. It was emotional. I was not as emotional as I was when I was at the young girl's funeral, but it was very, it was an emotional time. Mm-hmm. So we're going through a few more images. And so President Obama stayed in the back the entire time until it was his time to speak. We believe out of respect for the family, so that he wouldn't be a distraction. And so when it was his time to speak, he
opened the
came
chat
out
window where on my screen
and spoke to the individuals out there. And someone asked me if did I like his speech? I wasn't paying attention. I felt like I had 30 minutes, to get the best images I could. So I'm running around the building. I've got a 2-to-4 hanging off of me. I'm trying to get the best images that I can. So yeah, it was an amazing experience to be able to be a part of this. Go back. Time. My family said they saw me running around on TV, and I was telling them I was trying my best not to be in anyone's way. So yeah, more images. This is me again in the baptismal area with the CNN camera because they allowed us to be back there with them. And they carried his body out one last time. This man here, this card is probably 6 feet tall, and he went to every site that John Lewis's body went to get people to sign the card. And he actually did the same thing for Sequoia Turner, the young girl that I told you about at the beginning. And so he gave this card to the family when the funeral service was over, and there were like thousands of signatures on it. It was beautiful. And so on our way there, people were waving. On our way to the burial site, people were waving. People were, thanking John Lewis, yelling out, thank you, thank you. We get to the site for his burial. And these are just the images from his burial. He had the gun salute. I'm sure there's a word for that. I can't remember. The tap, maybe. He had the playing of the trumpet. And there were other photojournalists, behind that fence. I think Ben was out there too. I was going to put a picture of him in here, trying to get the processional of the body as it came through. But yeah, it was very emotional. It was, I don't want to call it a highlight of the year, but it was a task that I took to heart, and I wanted to really do my best. And like I said at the beginning, I was nervous as all get out, but I had a good conversation with a few photojournalists that were just like, you got this. So I believed in myself. And I think that's it. So that is the last image. So John Lewis was buried by his wife at the funeral site. So thank you.
Do you have some questions coming up?
Okay.
There are a couple people who would like to know from both of you what gear you used to shoot these images.
I'll go first. I have two Canon 1X Mark IIs. And then, like I said, I had a 2-to-4 in the chapel, but I was really shooting with a 70-200 with a 1.4 converter on it. And then for the protest, I was just using probably a 24-70 and a 70-200. Oh, you're muted, Ben.
And just kind of started shooting a little differently and loved it. So I've got a couple of, let me see. Maybe there we go. Okay, they got me turned on. So I'm a Fuji guy. I switched to Fuji when I moved overseas, moved to Jerusalem, and just kind of love the way I see with them. So I was using 2 Fuji bodies and all prime lenses except for one long zoom. So all my wides and up to about 85 millimeter is all prime. So a little more switching of lenses, but I just love the way the images look, and it makes me think more about my positioning than I do when I'm using a zoom lens.
And I would prefer to use a prime lens, but I don't. Yeah, have I was going to say. Go ahead.
The other thing that allowed me to do is the Fujis are set up really well for moving pictures to my phone. So I didn't carry a computer ever. I was pulling pictures to my phone and then sending them to Beta, Bob Andres, or Sandra Brown, and they were putting them in the system for me, which allowed me to kind of stay in the game at the protests and to pay more attention to what was happening around me. So it was huge.
Alyssa, we've got a question for you. Wondering if you were collecting names and locations as you were shooting, and how did you get the info if you didn't have a reporter with you?
Are we talking about the protests, I think?
It sounds like she was talking about everything.
Okay.
No matter what you were shooting, did you get your name? Not the protest, but like the John Lewis stuff, the funeral, just in general. Do you get that information yourself, or do you rely on
yes.
something else?
So I rely on our editors at the paper to give us the information of what's happening throughout the day, throughout the process of it all. They'll tell us the night before or when it's happening during the time. Being in pool, they told me while I was in the car what we were going to do. I couldn't work that whole day. So the day that John Lewis's body landed in Atlanta and then went to the state capitol, after it got to the state capitol, we already had someone inside that was going to shoot the ceremony that happened inside. But I do rely on my editors heavily, and also the photojournalists that are around me, because most of the time we're all doing the same work, so we can lend each other information and tips.
Okay, and for either of you, what's been your most difficult day emotionally covering the protests surrounding the calls for police reform?
Well,
go ahead,
I don't know that I can point to one day. I mean, I guess if I had to, it'd probably be the first day, just because it was so unexpected. How much chaos there would be, either that or the day after Rayshard Brooks was killed over at the Wendy's, when the Wendy's burned. Both of those were, extremely emotional, and took a long time to process. When you're working, I think most photojournalists understand this. You get focused and you're doing the job. You're really paying attention to what's happening, and it's not until you get home and you're done, and you look through your pictures one last time, you got a quiet moment, and everybody else is asleep in the house, that it really hits you, and you kind of sit there and try and process and that you've really seen.
I would say I would give you a day that was more emotional, maybe not difficult. And for me, specifically, the most difficult day was when I was detained by the DNR, because it just mentally messed me up, because I was in a groove and it felt like no one wanted to listen to anything I had to say. But as far as the protests are concerned, I was very emotional when it came to there was a group of women that did a all women's protest for Breonna Taylor and George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery. And it was very emotional for me, because to see a sea of Black women, women of color, white women, come together and have a moment in time for them to just speak for themselves. At one point, a man wanted to speak up and everyone was like, no, this is a woman's protest. And for me, that was beautiful, because it was giving them the opportunity to speak up and have a voice and a place to share their feelings and thoughts. And I really enjoyed being in that environment, because I do know, as a Black woman, sometimes, maybe our thoughts and ideas could be pushed to the side. So that was emotional for me.
Okay, we've got another question from a student who's not in photojournalism or journalism, but they do currently work for a university paper. And what tips do you have for them to break into the business?
Ben, you want to go first, if you have any?
Well, I mean, if you're trying to, I'd say find something that you're very passionate about, and shoot the hell out of it. That's going to be the most fulfilling for you. You're going to make the best pictures, and you're going to have something to show to editors and people that might hire you.
I agree with Ben. Find something that you're passionate about. If you don't have anything you're passionate about and you maybe want to get into photojournalism, I would just start with photographing events, remembering to photograph them, wide, medium, and tight. Get visual variety. Work on getting names, going up to people and talk to them. That really helps, because captions are really important if you want to do photojournalism. And even if you just want to write, like Ben said, find something you're passionate about and make that something that you really focus on in your work, because that will resonate better than just trying to do the thing that's hot right now.
And we've got another question that, Alyssa, you mentioned your experience with DNR, but were there any other occasions where either of you felt threatened by police or even protesters?
Okay, can you repeat that for me?
Were there any other times that you felt threatened by police or protesters, or people saying they were mad at the media or didn't want you photographing them?
Okay, go ahead, Ben.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think it was the same day you were detained, Alyssa, and I think that was the first day of the curfews. And that day I was walking back to my car after curfew alone, and about 4 police officers started to rush across the street towards me. And then they stopped halfway across the street, turned around, and went back. Um, I'm assuming they saw the cameras, but clearly that shows a difference in privilege and the way they reacted to both of us. So that was the only time I ever had any close encounter with law enforcement, other than some tear gas. I had a few instances where just in my gut, I realized I thought I'd been pushing a little too far. There was no other photographers around. The police weren't around, and some things were getting destroyed. And my gut said, it's time to turn around and go home. And that's exactly what I did.
So besides the DNR moment, I didn't feel any pressure from police. I think that nowadays, with the more political climate, I'm getting more of that, the media, that we're fake news, and people will come to your face and tell you you're fake and want to, verbally spar with you, which is not something I'm interested in doing. But as far as maybe covering the Confederate kind of protest that happened at Stone Mountain, I didn't feel threatened because, like I said, they were looking, if you came at them, they were looking for you to, it was something they were looking for. But if you just kind of not prance around, but, were quiet and did your job, that was something that no one really messed with me with. But like I said, also, there is a community where people will just walk around and be like, are you okay? Other photojournalists, they're not looking out for you in a way, but they are at the same time. So that made me feel more comfortable in situations. But the DNR was the only time I had issues with police officers harassing me.
Okay. We have just a couple more questions that I think we can get to real quick. One was, Ben, I believe this question came up during your presentation, but they'd love to hear what the racial justice movement means to you and your family.
Well, I mean, of course, we talk a lot about it. It's important to us. I guess the hard part for me, and I'm sure for Adrian too, is we've now got a 15-year-old son who's, about to start driving, and our police officer is just going to look at him as another black kid and try and harass him and pull him out of the car and all those things that up until now we haven't really had to worry about because he's with us. Maybe the pandemic was kind of helpful in that regard because the kids were at home and I didn't have to worry as much about it. But I mean, clearly, we follow it closely, and it's the social justice, racial justice movement here. But then it's very much the same struggle in other countries and in Palestine and with a lot of people that we've shared a lot of time with. So, I mean, it's important worldwide. A lot of marginalized people.
All right, and just one last question for Alyssa. Adrian would like to know what compelled you to go into visual journalism and who your role models were that inspired you.
To be honest, I saw a National Geographic VHS tape that a substitute teacher put in to get us to lunch. And I said, that's it. That's what I want to do. I didn't really know anything about visual journalism, to be completely honest with you. I just knew that it looked like you could take images and tell stories. And for me, coming from a background, I kind of moved around a lot as a kid, specifically in schools. And so I also dealt with seeing racial discrimination at a young age, and knowing that I saw that and how it kind of impacted how I honestly saw everything else in my life made me want to be able to tell stories so people could understand what was happening in other people's lives. So I use visual journalism like most people do as a component, but I really try to focus on the fact that most of the issues, social issues that are happening, racial issues in this country, there's a bigger, I don't know, structure or something that affects it. So it's like, I want to show that. I want to show how racism affects people. I want to show how sexism or, ableism, all those things affects other people. As far as role models are concerned, I really fell in love with Gordon Parks' work when I was in college, but there are so many people right now that are doing great work. Monica Herndon, who is at the Philly Inquirer, Michael Santiago, who you all just saw. You have Yoshi James at the San Francisco Chronicle. There's Angela Peterson at the Milwaukee Journal Sentinel. Every single person at the Louisville Courier-Journal have been kicking such ass this year. Their year has just been crazy. And so their work is beautiful. And so, like I said, all the people that have helped me along the way you could say, are my role models. So, yeah.
All right. Well, thanks to you both so much for sharing your images and your thoughts with us. I really appreciate it. I do want to remind everybody that recorded speaker sessions from today can be pre-ordered up until midnight tonight on our website. After today, the price goes up to $49. You can go to photojournalism.org/watch, and you'll find a link there for purchase. And thank you both again. I appreciate it.
Thank you.